Thank you for joining For Our Special Kids, where we openly and honestly discuss the magic and the mess of raising a child with special needs. We are thrilled to have you here and hope this time provides you with some wonder and wisdom. I'm your host, Jennifer Lansing. Let's get started. Today's interview is with Kate Swenson, author of Forever Boy, a mother's memoir of autism and finding joy. If you haven't picked up her book on Amazon or listened to it on Audible, you might consider it, even if you don't have a child with autism. I learned a lot, and our paths had many commonalities. Her insight and advice for any parent or caregiver of a child with special needs is spot on. In our interview today, we talk about hitting the emotional and physical bottom, grief and unpacking our emotions, why we both hate playgrounds, and her advice on how to navigate the great chasm between the diagnosis and the joy. I do want to note I am no expert on shamanism, so take my comments as simply that, comments. I also wanted to give a special thanks to Susan G., hostess of the podcast When Autumn Comes. My interview with her just came out this past week, so head over there for a little more insight into Teal and Mai's relationship. We also have some big news to share. I will be keynoting the Apricity Hope Project's Mama's Retreat this September. So go to apricityhope.org in the next few weeks for more information, and you can certainly listen to the podcast and find out more as well. A quick reminder before I go, if you like these episodes, would you take a hot second to rate and review us? It is much appreciated and it'll help other people find us. So thank you for that. And finally, everyone seems to really respond to the Meet Amazing series. If you or someone you know is doing incredible things or simply surviving in amazing ways, will you send them my way? They need to share their story so all of us can benefit from it. Just email me at jen@fourspecialkids.com. Okay, I hope you enjoy and let me know what you think, and have a great week. I'm here with Kate Swenson, the founder of Finding Cooper's Voice and the nonprofit The More Than Project. She is a mother to 4 kids, bless you, my dear, a wife, and a proud Minnesotan. She writes and creates videos regularly about her life as a mother and an autism advocate for Facebook, Instagram, and her website, Finding Cooper's Voice. Her book, Forever Boy, a mother's memoir of autism and finding joy, is available now and highlights the transformation that Kate went through after her son Cooper's diagnosis. Kate, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Hi, excited to be here.
So I want to just start with your book's amazing. And I'm sure you've heard so many people say that, but I bet it doesn't ever get old to hear people say that.
I mean, for me, and maybe you can relate to this. It's like, well, does anyone care what I have to say? Will anyone listen to me? Will anyone read anything I write? So it is seeing how well it's done has been just wonderful.
Well, and Teal doesn't have autism, but there are a lot of individuals in our world that do have that diagnosis, that label put on them. And it was exceptionally eye-opening for me to understand the huge spectrum, the severe, but also the mild. And I didn't know there was such a huge variety. So let's start with just talking a little bit about Cooper, where he's at, his diagnosis, if you're okay with that, and how you started writing this book, because I know it has a lot to do with your blog and COVID and all that jazz.
Yeah, so Cooper today, he's 12. He is a 6th grader. He still carries the same diagnosis that he got when he was 3 and could have got at probably 9 months old, to be honest. But we lived in a very rural area, and as much as we were advocating to try and figure out what was going on, we hit a lot of dead ends, which we hit a lot of wait and see, relax. He's a boy, you're a first-time mom, which can be really just frustrating. And that still happens today. Also, a lot of like long appointment wait times. We had to wait 9 months for his diagnosis, which that's a lifetime in the world of early intervention.
Oh, that's 1/3 of his life.
Yeah. So the diagnosis he got was severe level 3 nonverbal autism with language impairment. And it's kind of stacked up since then. I say alphabet soup. But the biggest thing that has happened is those labels, which are very helpful to get services and supports, and we are not embarrassed, we embrace them, but we don't need to say them every day. So they're on his chart in our drawer, and he's Cooper first, and that's how we look at him. And I think that shift is really important for parents, and it seems to happen as they go.
That's huge. We don't label Teal. We don't even talk about her diagnosis because of that. She is Teal. She is this beautiful, magical person. And I don't need to alphabet soup her. I don't need to label her for her to be her own person.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. So it did take you a long time to get the diagnosis. For people that perhaps are sitting here with a 9-month-old, what are some of the symptoms that you saw with Cooper in the beginning?
So Cooper, from the day we brought him home from the hospital as a newborn, was incredibly rigid, which is hard to believe that a newborn could be rigid, but he was. He loved stimulation. So I went on to have 3 other kids who, loved to nurse and be snuggled and warm and held tight in sleep. Cooper was awake. He was up. He was active. He wanted to be watching lights, or we lived in Minnesota, northern Minnesota at the time, with the snow falling. He liked that stimulation. He never slept, which is a big common sign, but I'll tell you, I have my 4th is a terrible sleeper too. And again, it goes to show you that there's not one size fits all when it comes to autism.
Yeah.
He also didn't develop language. He struggled to breastfeed. He cried a lot. And I just knew in my gut that something was going on. I didn't know the word autism. I didn't have any idea, but I knew something was different in his development. And but also didn't want there to be anything. So I lived in this constant space of battling, is there, but I don't want there to be.
Wow, that's a statement that I think every single parent of a child with special needs can relate to, Kate, because
we want to be wrong.
Yeah, we want answers, but we want to be wrong.
Yes.
And it's not that I am upset that I have a child with special needs. My God, I'm so blessed. She is phenomenal. She has completely transformed my life. I love the way that you say on your book, A Mother's Memoir of Autism and Finding Joy, because it is joyful, but it doesn't always happen right away. You get a diagnosis, and I mean, my world fell apart. Mm-hmm. The ideal of what we thought to be true about our futures. And you talk very openly about that in your book, about you had all of these dreams of how your perfect family was going to be. And Cooper wasn't helping you with that dream immediately.
Well, and I think expectations are so human. I mean, we all have expectations, right? And I can say big ones to little ones. I expected that we would continue, we'd be a family that traveled. There's one. But I also expected that my son would talk. So there's all different, a variety of expectations, right? And it's very normal and very human to have those.
Oh, yeah.
And when your world suddenly changes, and it's not by choice. So that's the other part of it too, is it was the first thing in my life that was ever out of my control. I always believe, if I'm going to get healthy, I'll start running. If I want a better job, I'll work harder. If I want an A, I'll study. But with autism, it's not black and white like that.
Not even close with any diagnosis. Yeah, I feel it. The book. So I would highly recommend that people read the book for a couple of reasons. One, there is so much similarity between your journey and mine, and so much disparity as well, right? But I could relate to so much of what you wrote, even though my child doesn't have autism. So I highly recommend that. But I also really recommend reading the book because it opened my eyes to my world and making sure that I am aware and kind. Now, Teal did that for me anyway, right? Teal immediately. You get a diagnosis of a child with special needs and you start getting that label and you start getting put into those groups and you start pulling away from certain friends because your child isn't developing like their child is, and you find yourself getting lonelier and lonelier, and so you've got this separation happening, so you immediately start looking differently at your world. But what you also did for me is I started looking with softer eyes at people that were older. I was always the child in school that if someone picked on another person, I would go stand up for them. I would go and say, that's not okay. Or why don't you come over here and be my friend? And I can give you names of people in my school that I did that for. And I've always been that child, but you really just profoundly helped me see that, like you said, the autism diagnosis doesn't go away. He's going to be a 40-year-old autist. And so talk with us a little bit about how that transformation, now he's 12 and you're starting to see changes, but talk to me about where you're thinking. Because in your book, you really do talk a lot about forward planning, all of that. And it's something we've never talked about here on the podcast.
Well, talking about forever is a very emotional thing. And it was for me, especially, and my husband. It took me time. So, I, with a vulnerable heart, fully admit that I didn't believe my son would have this diagnosis of severe nonverbal autism forever. I just assumed by kindergarten we would be catching up. By a certain point, he would start talking. It may look a little different, but I didn't realize that we could stay in this hard space for so long. So I hit my lowest point after I cover it in the book at the climax of the book. We were out in public and we were surrounded by families and little children, and we saw how severe and how challenging Cooper's life was going to be just right in front of us. I mean, it was like a hefty dose. And that night I had him in the bathtub, and it's always when I'm washing his feet, I was washing his feet and I was looking at him, and he was big. They weren't little toddler feet anymore. They were 6-year-old feet. And that was the moment that I realized this is forever. And I need to get on board with this. So I hit my lowest. It took me a while. And then I just started building myself back up. And I surrounded myself with families like ours, with children of all ages, all the way up. And I tried to build this community because I needed it. And I knew others had to need it too.
When did you start writing?
So I actually started my blog, Finding Cooper's Voice, when he wasn't diagnosed yet. He was 2. And I thought we just had a speech delay. Like, I held on to that term, speech delay, like it was armor. It was wrapped around me. But just little snippets and little stories. It was very raw. And I started doing video maybe 5 years ago. And not having any idea that what I was saying could be controversial. I just talked about, I'm sad that my son doesn't talk, and I'm worried that he'll be bullied, and this is hard in my marriage, and I feel guilty with my other kids. And that's really how I got to the size that I am today, is because I tackled those topics that no one wanted to talk about, but they're our life, so we shouldn't be ashamed.
You talk openly. Whoo, wow. In the book. I mean, there were times that I was just crying listening to you. And I love it that I listened to it on Audible. And so you told the story, and that was really cool. I'm like, oh, I feel like I already know you. Because I'm like, oh, she read me the book. I highly recommend it. Actually, for a lot of us moms, that's the only way we can get a book in, right? I'm so happy that you had it on Audible. Thank you. But you are raw. And I'm very honest and very open, but I think you took it to another level for me. Marriage is hard with children with special needs. People don't talk about that. I finally openly said to one of my girlfriends, Teal doesn't get invited to play dates because they just don't know what to do. She doesn't talk.
Yeah.
And she has a talking board. And I mean, she's magical and telepathic. And so she doesn't really have to talk because what she wants very clearly, but she doesn't get invited to play dates, or people don't understand that my husband and I haven't actually had a real sit-down conversation in a couple of months. And guess what? It blew up over text last night. I mean, really? That's how my conversation, a really good conversation, started with my husband, was a blow up on text. People don't talk about that stuff. They don't talk about looking out at the playground. Like, I hate playgrounds. I hate them. Teal loves them. She doesn't care. She doesn't care that she's different.
Right.
And I would imagine Cooper doesn't care either.
Yeah. He's blissfully unaware and
Yes.
happy in his own world.
Yes.
Yep.
And Teal will engage with anyone that comes up to her and will give them the absolute openest heart, the most love, the most acceptance. She is the beacon, just like Cooper is, the beacon of what we all should be. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I know she wants to go to a playground, it kind of breaks my heart.
Oh, yes. Yes. I had a love-hate relationship with playgrounds for a long time.
Yeah. Tell me about that process. How do you like them now?
Well, we're at another crossroad. Cooper's 12 and he still wants to play on the little kid equipment. And, you'll see mothers, pull their toddlers away, even though Cooper's not a danger in any way. But why is this big boy here? So I've been talking to a lot of parents of older kids whose kids are 20 and want to still be on the kid equipment. It's hard to navigate. Again, I'll just go back to really carving out your own place in this world. So it's taken us a lot of years, but now Cooper has adaptive horseback riding. He has music every Monday night that he does with a group of kids just like him, all disabilities. We have a sports sampler, we have Miracle League. And it's this like safe space where we can be whoever we want to be. But even as comfortable as I am, I'm 100% in the land of acceptance, and it's still hard for me to see other 12-year-old kids if you put us in that setting. So I still kind of fight that. I really truly do. And I try to put us in our happy world.
That's really normal though, right? You talk a lot about grief in the book, and it's okay to still have grief. It's okay for me to feel that. I can even just listening to you talk about it, I put myself there and I get that lump in my throat. The tears that, well up in my eyes, because it is forever, it is, you don't walk away from a diagnosis. I guess some kids might, but most of us don't. Okay, let's shift. Chapter 7. You talk about a quote that you read, which was, special kids are given to special people. And you went off the rail. I think that's actually maybe what you said. You got very angry. And so talk with me a little bit about that. And then I can't wait to give the quote that you say at the end, which is, well, I'll give it to you now. The special kids are given to special people. Talk to me about the differences and what happened there.
Well, I think it's just so, it just cuts down that we're human. It tries to put us like in these special categories that we're not necessarily equipped to be. And I think I go on in that chapter talk about like, I wasn't given superhuman strength to carry Cooper's body. I wasn't given extra hours in the day to navigate his care, the ability to live without sleep when he didn't sleep. And I could go on and on. But people think that when you get this diagnosis that you're automatically given all these superhuman tools, and you're not.
No.
And you're probably honestly given less support because there's less people out there to connect with initially. So I don't like when people do that toxic positivity when it makes me a little loony because it just cuts down the realness and the rawness of what we're going through.
And I am very positive.
So am I.
It was a very good thing for you to point out. There's a difference between true, real, heartfelt positivity. Like when I say my child is magical, I truly believe that. Does that take away from the fact that when she gets frustrated, she swats and hits because she can't talk? No. Like, I love how you said no one gave you the tools. Like, nobody gave me unlimited patience.
No.
I had to develop that, because if you knew me before, Teal, holy goodness gracious, I am not a patient person. And outside of most anything but Teal, I am not patient. And so nobody gave me that. I had to learn. She had to teach me. She taught me patience.
Well, and I think what I say a lot now is Cooper and I figured out autism together. He also was frustrated. He was also confused and didn't understand, I think, his own body and what, I always say he wasn't made for this world and the world doesn't understand him. So we figured it out together. We settled in, but it takes time.
And you have to be gentle during that time.
And patient with ourselves.
And patient. Oh goodness. I was chatting to Alex, my husband, last night, and he was he's going to hate this if he ever listens to this. He was talking about curtains, and we haven't put curtains in these 2 bedrooms for like 5 years. And I finally said to him, do you want me to spend time researching curtains, or do you want me to spend time researching new things for Teal? Because, like what you said, I have the same 24 hours that everyone else does.
Yeah.
And I just said priorities, man. And if you want to go research curtains, by all means, go. He's going to hate this. God, sorry, Alex. Love you. But
We have similar things here too.
Oh, goodness gracious, right? I'm like, come on, choose your priorities. You talk a lot in the book about how you dove headfirst into this whole thing and you completely lost yourself. You lost your marriage. You lost your friends. You lost a lot. So, how did you, for people that are listening, and people don't even know that, okay, you lost your marriage, and spoiler alert, you're remarried.
Yes, and had 2 more kids.
And had 2 more kids. Exactly. Amazing. We should just talk a whole episode on marriage because I do think it's a huge thing. But how did you find yourself again? Because I know that's a lot of what this book was about. Is finding Cooper's voice was more about finding your voice.
Well, I had to let go of those very real expectations. I had to stop comparing. I do a lot of public speaking now, a lot of presentations to different groups of people, parents or nurses or teachers or whatever it may be. But I talk about how we cannot heal from what we refuse to acknowledge. And I refuse to acknowledge reality. I could say my son is autistic. My son has autism. But I couldn't say the severity of it, the forever of it. I just couldn't. I was so go, 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 go that I just would not stop. So the way I described it was I had all these suitcases, as cheesy as it sounds, and each suitcase had anger, grief, jealousy, sadness, frustration. Every time I encountered a new emotion and a new depth of the emotion, I would just put it on my back and I would just keep going. And I got to the point when I hit that breaking point, when all of it just bared out. I couldn't even hardly walk anymore. I looked in the mirror. I was pale. I was thin. I was big bags under my eyes. And I was just abrasive, meaning I was not who I wanted to be. And once I set those down and I legit stepped into my grief and I unpacked every suitcase, I am jealous that my friends can travel. I'm angry that my son doesn't talk. And I went through each emotion, and I tell you, I healed so fast. I mean, it was fast. Once I was like, this feels this way. I'm not going to run from it. I'm going to step into this. I'm going to feel this really ickiness in my gut and this lump in my throat. I just had it happen the other day. I had this whole hour where I was just, I call it the loss of experience. So there's a 6th grade dance. And Cooper can't go, but it's not even that. It's that he doesn't understand or care or know about how fun a school dance is and how special it is and how nerve-wracking and how, all of that. And I sat in it, in that loss of experience. And, here's the funny part about the story is I said to my husband and to a friend, I'm so sad about this, right? So I practice what I preach. I'm so sad. I'm angry and I'm sad. And my husband rushed me off. He's like, oh, dances are dumb. And my friend was like, oh gosh, who cares? Or bring them, I got brushed off by both people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not the dance. It's the loss of the experience for him and for me. And I sat in it for a couple hours and I cried and I wrote it down. I talked about it and now I'm better. So unpack your suitcases, friends.
Yeah. Unpack your suitcases. That's a really good one. It's hard to do that. It's
yes.
hard. So it's not like you just got there like, oh, one day you're just going to unpack all, you hit bottom and then you had to say, or you saw yourself in the mirror and then you said, okay, I don't want to live like this anymore. And I think there was a huge transition in the book then of how you actively started to see joy. And I think what's really important to look at is you can actively see joy and still have loss of experience. Random times, right? All of a sudden something hits you about your child, that what they're not going to be able to do, or that there's no guarantees. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if Teal will ever get asked out on a date to go to a dance. I mean, who knows if she doesn't talk? I don't know. And as you were talking, flash through like, oh, all of those daddy daughter dances where they put pictures up on Facebook and
Mm-hmm.
sorry.
Oh,
But
it is
like
gutting.
social
Yeah.
media is horrible of comparison, right? You took a
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Actually, I'm not. I cry all the time. Uh I unpack my suitcase a lot just in front of people.
Yeah.
uh, so you do talk about the social media and the negativity and the comparisons and all of that. Did you take a time away from social media for a bit?
I did personally. So like from
Mm,
the personal side, I've
yeah.
always done kind of the, I'll air quote, the business side, the writing and the sharing.
Yeah.
But what would get me is, so my two dearest friends who I'm still very close with, have kids the exact same age as Cooper. And I remember like when they started dance lessons or t-ball, or the one that I always bring up, it's probably in my book too, is like when we couldn't go to Disney on Ice. Like, I mean, it was like these doors were closing, right? The first day of school was really hard. It's a big part of my
Hmm.
book. I talk about I wasn't going to do the sign with the first day of school
Right.
because he didn't even care about his new backpack or that the bus was coming. He didn't, none of it mattered, it was the emotions. And I almost felt like a fraud. And at the last minute, I took the photo because it mattered to me. I wanted it. And yes, comparison is very hard. But the other thing I'll say to you too is that for me, that was hard. And I don't know if you'll be able to relate to this, but getting the autism diagnosis and realizing that Cooper wasn't going to be like his neurotypical peers was hard. But then the harder part for me was when his autistic peers started talking and started moving on and we kind of stayed frozen. That was actually a harder loss for me, I think, than the bigger one, because it was almost like I feel like we were forgotten for a while.
Uh, I mentioned that I think in a recent episode where I felt guilty because Teal just started walking
Mm-hmm.
and I felt guilty. And you know what? That's baloney.
Oh,
I
yes.
need to celebrate that. But it's interesting, right? I'm on that other side. And yet then there's other kids that are completely talking and Teal's not. Uh,
Well, it's survivor's guilt is the term that was used for me. So, and I'll tell you now, Cooper is very conversational. I have people that will reach out to me and they're like, I just wish my son or my daughter could achieve what Cooper's reached. It's amazing. And it's like, it's a version of survivor's guilt is what it is.
Interesting. I hadn't really addressed that at all. Hmm. All right. Okay. I want to give you some props. At the end of your book, hopefully I'm giving you lots of props, but at the end of your book, you talked about putting things into perspective of, listen, it's important for Cooper to be able to put on a seatbelt.
Mm-hmm.
And I started shifting the way I interact with Teal because of that statement.
Oh, awesome.
Because her being able to put on her clothes and put on a seatbelt and open doors and feed herself, those things are becoming more clear to me of that or knowing how to count by fives or twos,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or, and again, I'm not saying education isn't important. Education is hugely important. But if I'm going to stress out about something, right? Because I have a choice, right? And again, I don't like the word stressing and I really try to stay chill, but hello, let's be honest. I worry all the time. You talk about that in your book. It never goes away, ever, ever, ever. Autism is always on your mind, always, always, always. It never flees. And when people look at you like, can you ever stop talking about that? You're like, no, because it is always there. Like, never is it not with you. It walks around. It's your shadow. You can't get rid of it. Okay. So, but what I'm really looking at is I have to make choices of where am I going to spend my energy with her. And I got to tell you, Kate, I started interacting with her differently in terms of how she needs to live in this world because it is my job. And you say this in the book, it's our job to make kids that can be in the world as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that.
Well, I think I relate to that so much because I was just talking to someone about being the mom of a kindergartner at the IEP table versus the sixth grade IEP mom at the table, right? And I remember in kindergarten, I'm like reading, writing, using a pencil, spelling, whatever, and they were probably looking at me like, oh my gosh, lady. And I was very vulnerable. And like now it's like, oh my gosh, I want him to have the best day every day. I want him to be welcome with open arms, love going to school. Right now he works on swimming and they bake cakes on Fridays and it's just these wonderful things. He's interacting with other kids. It's like, we have to shift where our energy is going to go and what really matters. And, Cooper can read, but it isn't a priority. Using a pencil is not a priority. Putting his shoes on, his slip-on shoes, huge priority. I'm getting older. I'm not gonna be able to bend down and put those shoes on for him when he's older.
No. Yes.
So it's like you start thinking about these things that it's this beautiful shift in what really matters.
Speaking of shifts, there was a huge shift in your book when women would say to you, like, oh, you're so lucky. And it's very interesting because you got there at the end of your book. So for people that are listening who maybe just got that diagnosis and they're sitting here like, there is the Grand Canyon between where I am right now and where Kate Swenson is. How do I even take one step forward? What advice would you give? What's the first couple steps that they can take?
I used to get so mad. I call them with love the old war horse moms. That's what
That's easy to say. War horse moms. Okay.
That's what it was. It was like these moms that were, have been doing this for 20 years and they're like telling me what to do. And it's like, I don't need you to tell me what to do. I need you to give me a life raft. Like I am drowning.
I'm drowning. Yeah.
I remember the stance they'd always say is like, you have to get him out in the community. And it's like, I can't, he runs or he melts down so the mountain was so high. The mountain was impossible to pass. So I tell parents now, pause. So you've just had a lot of information thrown at you and there's a lot of information out there. I wish that I would have just paused. I dove right into a million things. Just enjoyed this child. It's not a race against time. That's the thing that you're made to feel like it's a race against time. It's not. Our kids are lifelong learners. Take a couple months. I mean, I'm not saying don't do therapy by any means, but just enjoy your child and just love them through. Really focus on the things that really matter, like getting programs in place, supports in place, the people in your life that matter, the ones that understand. There's just so much pressure to catch these kids up. And it's like, well, what is caught up anyways? I mean, let's just be present right now.
If you look at the shaman belief in shamanism, you have to have a diagnosis of some kind to actually be a medicine man or a medicine woman or a healer. It's an honor to be given the disability, and I put that in quotes, the diagnosis. Like it's kind of if you're just a typical person, you're not magical. If you're just a typical person, if you don't hear voices or if you can't talk, if you don't have that gift, then you can't be a healer for us. Like you can't be a magic person. The reason I bring that up is because there is a leap that you have to take. And I think the only way you can get to even seeing any magic is if you do pause, is if you step back and say, okay, I'm not trying to fix you anymore. This is you. Meet them where they're at. This is you. And I honor you. And I love everything that you are. Yes, and I talk with Teal about this. Yes, we're going to try to do things to help you walk. Yes, we're going to try to do things to help you talk. Yes, we're going to try to do things to help you eat and all of that. But in the end, and I need to tell her this again when she comes home from school, I honor who you are. I'm not trying to change you. And I think the only way you can have that conversation with yourself and your child and your spouse is if you take the pause.
Yeah.
Completely agree with you on the pause. So what was the hardest part of the book to write?
I had so much I wanted to say. It was funny. My publisher was like, you talk so much about being tired. I was
you do. Yeah. I was.
I was.
Because that's reality.
Yeah. And a lot of the autism world for us, I call it the secret world of autism. A lot of it, sounded far-fetched or sound made up. And I felt like there were times when I had to just like prove to people that this was reality. There's a story that was actually cut out of the book where Cooper was so obsessed with TV and we had a 70-inch TV in our living room, and would have to remove the TV to get him to like focus and reset. And I drew this, these images of like us like carrying the TV in and out, and people that were editing were like, "That's not true." And I was like, but it was.
Wow. Yeah, you do a really good job of just opening people's eyes. I had no idea. None.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that. Like, none. And what was the best part to write? Like, what did you get all warm and fuzzy about? What do you celebrate when you think about the book?
2 parts. I love my letter to Sawyer, which I think is a favorite of everybody's. I write him a letter when he was 4 and talk about just how much I love him and how special he is. And I'm so thankful for him.
Sawyer's your second child. So
yep,
Cooper is your first child. And there was a lot of, do we have another child? There's a lot of that in the book, and the conversations and the what ifs and the guilts and all of that. So you did decide to go have another child, and 3 more as a matter of fact. But the second one was really a huge part of the book, Sawyer.
Yes. Sawyer's a huge part of the story in the beginning, for sure. And then the last chapter is all the advice that I would give myself if I could do it, go back. And I've had a lot of people say to me that they have that part bookmarked, and they'll read that when they're at a low point or just needed some inspiration. So that makes me feel really proud.
You should be really proud. The book is really amazing.
Good.
Yeah. How can people find you? I know I'll put everything in the show notes, but you do have a couple of things coming up, and you have a nonprofit. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yep. So, my website is findingcoopersvoice.com. Very simple. And on there is, you can request me as a speaker, read blogs, find out events. I do a lot of public speaking. But also, I launched a nonprofit. I co-founded it with my friend Amanda. It's called the More Than Project. And we are both moms of children with autism, kind of middle of the road. We're through that initial sting. We've got our supports and services in place, and we want to help those moms that, the way we describe it, that are on the bathroom floor that can't get up. And we see it every single day. Moms come to me and say, I can't go on. And we want to help them. So that really for us has been having in-person events and Zooms and conversations, support groups, that sort of thing. We have an event in April in Minnesota, and I'll tell you, 70% of people fly in for it. So you do not have to be local. You can go to my website to learn more about that. It'll be 2 days of education, brunch, mimosas, pampering, hugs, that sort of thing.
Yay.
And then my book, like you mentioned, it's on Audible. People like the Audible, but you can also get it on Amazon, and it's on sale, right? It's like $13 right now. Pretty cheap for a hardcover.
Yeah.
Oh, Forever Boy.
Forever Boy. What a great title. There's a lot of nuance in that title.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done. Well, I am honored to have you here. I do have one final question, and that is, what is one word that you would use to describe Cooper?
I would say brave. Cooper is the way, every day he goes out into a world that he cannot necessarily communicate with, that doesn't understand him or appreciate him. And he does it fearlessly, and he goes and he loves the world. And I think I need to be brave like him, because I'm the one that's scared all the time. So he's taught me so much about owning himself and being comfortable in his own skin.
That's a really good answer. Thanks for spending some time with us. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found 1 or 2 meaningful nuggets of information to make your day better. If you think there's value in what we do, please take a moment to tell another friend, family member, or a caregiver. We'd love to hear from you at forourspecialkids@gmail.com. You can send in a question, a comment, a topic that you'd like to learn more about, or if you'd like us to highlight a certain person, please send that information to us. It makes our show so much better and so much more valuable for you. Our Facebook and Instagram handle is For Our Special Kids. And finally, remember to witness the wonder and the wisdom within yourself and others. Until next time.